Welcome to the Idaho section of the American Water Resources Association Meet the Professional series. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm a water resources engineer at HDR Engineering, and today we'll be having a conversation with Steve Hannula with SPF Water Engineering. The IDAWRA is dedicated to the advancement of water resources management, research, and education. Members represent a community of water professionals with diverse backgrounds, but they share engagement in solving some of the toughest water resources challenges. Until we're able to meet in person while we're in COVID times, we ask you that you stay in touch with us through our website, awraidaho.org. We've been working hard to keep our website up with calendar updates and other information. So please visit us at awraidaho.org. And lastly, we'd like to, before we begin the interview, like to thank our sponsor and member organizations, Avista Corporation, Brown and Caldwell, Haley and Aldrich, HDR Engineering, and Jacobs Engineering Group. We'll go live. All right. Well, welcome to Mr. Steve Hannula today. Steve's our guest for the Meet the Professional interview. Mr. Hannula provides project management and water resources services for SPF Water Engineering. He has over 25 years of experience providing technical expertise in water resource projects, environmental compliance, and permitting. Steve holds a Master's of Engineering in Geological Engineering from the Colorado School of Mines and a Bachelor's in Geology from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. Steve is a professional engineer, professional geologist, and a project management professional. Steve, we're certainly happy to have you on, a former president of the Idaho chapter of the AWRA, and looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better and learn a little bit more about your career and what you do day to day.
Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for the introduction. Appreciate it.
You got it. So first, Steve, tell us a little bit about how you first became interested in water resources as a career.
Well, as you read off, I have a bachelor's degree in geology, so I've always had an interest in the outdoor stuff, things of the earth, dirt and mountains and how things form. And along the way, this kind of the engineering side of me came along, and it's a little bit more analytical than geology, and started thinking, well, how can I get this engineering interest and geology together? And there were terms back when I was, much younger, geological engineer or groundwater engineer, and started just evaluating that. So, that kind of fits my skill set and where my academics are and my interests. And so I just kind of started working in that direction, found some jobs that just kind of started me in that route through life.
Okay, and we were talking before the interview started. One thing that we have in common is we're both Midwestern transplants to Idaho. Tell me a little bit about how you found your way from Wisconsin to Idaho.
Well, I attribute that to the U.S. Navy. After undergraduate school, I joined the Navy and got into the nuclear power program, which at the time they had the test reactors out at the INL,
sure,
outside of Idaho Falls, and that brought me to Idaho, and gave me a lot of the kind of engineering side of things versus geology. And after the Navy stint there, kind of blended things. How can I use that geology and what it might have learned through engineering, and just trying to balance the two interests.
Sure. You bring that up. My father-in-law has a similar story. He went to school at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. They grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and after spending a little bit of time in the mountains, decided he was going to stay in the mountains. So I can certainly understand that.
Yeah.
So you were in the Navy. You were at INL working there. Was that before or after you got your master's degree from?
That was before. I got out of the Navy, then got married. Wife has family in Idaho, but we ended up at school going for the master's degree. I worked with USGS for a little while. I really enjoyed that. But I knew that was going to be a short-term thing. The continued schooling was going to be in my life, so we packed up, headed off to Colorado, go to Colorado School of Mines. That was a dream school of mine to go to. And so I was able to successfully get through a master's program there. Shortly after that, we started my career there in Fort Collins, Colorado, just a little bit north of Golden, where School of Mines was. I worked there for a number of years, engineering consulting, getting into water and the engineering side of things, mostly in the mining field at that part of my career.
So then you were in Colorado. Did you have the move back to Idaho? Was that partially a family move, partially a special interest move?
Yeah, so living in Fort Collins back then, that was from 95 to 2000. The Front Range there, the real estate prices was going crazy. People were moving to Fort Collins like mad, and I don't know. We didn't have any family connections there. As I mentioned before, my wife was from Idaho, and she had family there. The ride from Fort Collins to Idaho during the major holidays, I was getting a little thin. So once we had kids, it was time to move. And so that's how I ended up in Boise in the year 2000. And I started then working with the company called ERO Resources. And that firm very much is into the water resources of Idaho.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm familiar with ERO. So you worked with a few different consulting firms. ERO, you've worked with Stantec, and now you're with SPF Engineering. So you're a very seasoned consulting engineer. What do you like about consulting? What about consulting that makes you tick?
Well, the fun part is that you never know what kind of project is what it's going to entail. Where from what I'm doing now is involving with water rights. I can design wells and pump systems. At Stantec, it was a little bit different atmosphere, different nature of the work, where project management was much more of a thing, just because of the nature of the size of the projects. So there's always a challenge. Either it's an engineering issue, a project management issue. How do you scope it? How do you minimize risks? How do you actually get the job done? So there's just so many moving parts and aspects to it. And ultimately, it deals with water resources, which I'm sure if you're living in Idaho, you appreciate the mountains and the clean water as much as the next guy.
Right.
So how do we manage that and make the use out of it like we should? So.
Sure. No, that's something that drew me to Idaho as well, is the importance of water, and everyone in the state is keyed into what's happening in terms of water. I remember, my father-in-law, he's a physician, he's a retired physician, would know about snowpack and projections for the coming year. So certainly a place that water is important to our way of life, how we recreate, how business, agriculture, and all the cities. That's the great resource Idaho has in the West is water.
Right. Water's a big deal in Idaho, and I'm not so much in a lot of the science, but more of in the consulting engineering world, more of how do we get the water to use? How do you get the water right? How do you get the pumps and the wells designed according to state standards? And how do we actually get that to be used efficiently? So all those little moving parts, that fascinates me.
Sure. So tell me, paint a picture for me a little bit. Your best days at work. What kind of tasks are you doing day to day, or what kind of tasks are you doing on your best day at work? Are you in the field? Are you in the office? Are you in the meeting room? Tell me about what you really like in these best days.
Well, that's a fun one there. At this point in my career, I do enjoy the chance to get outside. Anytime I can get my boots dirty, I jump on the chance, because it's a rare thing at my age, at my point of the career. But if I can get outside and talk with the people on the ground, got a project now working with a driller, just to pick his brain as to how he's putting in that well and understanding the issues he faces to get his job done right. That helps me in my next design or my next spec that I write, and just to understand it, making sure that I'm not stuck in my thoughts and ignoring something that I shouldn't be ignorant of. But you have to be out in the field, talking with people who are out there actually doing the work. Those are good days. Be able to come back then and write it up and make some kind of coherent report. That's okay. The technical side of things is okay.
Sure.
Yeah, out in the field and being outside. I don't care if it's muddy or raining or cold or hot. It's a good day.
Sure. One of the things you just talked about there was kind of ongoing learning or continuing education, whether it be formal or not formal. Kind of on the job learning. You've got over 25 years experience, and you're still learning every day and picking people's brains. Looking at your professional certifications, you've got you've got a PE, you've got a PG, you've got a PMP. It seems like that career-long learning is something you've embraced. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Each one of those credentials, if you will, come along with a purpose. Certainly with the Masters of Engineering, I'd have to go through some hoops to be able to stamp designs or any kind of PE requirements need that stamp. But along the way, start getting involved in some sort of a water quality or nutrient pathogen evaluation for any kind of wastewater disposal. They require anything to do with geology or hydrogeology required the PG stamp. So we need to go through that, even though it kind of blends in a little bit with engineering. If it's dealing with geology, you need that other stamp. And along the way, say I got 25 years of experience, I don't get the opportunity to be out in the field and doing the design work. So automatically the career starts going more and more into the management. How do you propose? How do you put a scope together? How do you get a budget together? How do you keep the project rolling along so it doesn't go off the rails? And the project management of any kind of engineering project is critical, in particular for engineering consulting. If we're not doing a project efficiently, on time, on budget, then business suffers. And I could be great at the technical side of things, but if I can't meet the deadlines and stay in budget, that's where the PMP certification comes in. I realize that as a career choice or a career direction, I've got to get to understand that language and have that skill, not only to help run a project there within the company, but if you work with a federal agency, they often have the same language on the project management side. They'll have the PMP certification. So if you're going to work on a federal contract, work with a federal agency, they'll have a PM there speaking that language. And it sure is nice to be able to speak it back and understand what they're after to keep their job moving along, keep the projects rolling forward. So
sure. I think one of the perceptions that there is out there is that you have to make a choice at some point in your career, maybe about 10 years in, and if you want to be a technical expert or if you want to be more on the business development and project management side of engineering, especially in consulting. But I think that there's a similar perception in the owner side and then in the public sector as well. It seems like you struck a little bit of a balance maybe between those two. Can you talk about that? Just kind of that inflection or that decision point in your career?
Yeah, and that was a personal choice there. I started with SPF just a little over a year ago. I was at Stantec prior to that. Stantec is a much bigger company.
Right.
the way they operate, the way they manage projects and conduct their business is different just by the fact that they are such a big company. And my career track there was going more and more towards the project management, watching budgets, coordinating teams, working on a lot of the, I call it the administrative side of things. I was drifting further and way further from technical reviews, technical design, understanding the kind of the fun stuff that we all went to school for. And so I had to make a personal choice. And a lot of my colleagues were going down the project management career track, and that's fine. It's good, it's solid, and it's very challenging because there's nuances within that career track that are a big challenge. I started realizing that, yeah, my 5-year plan, my 10-year plan, is that what I want to be doing? And so I did luck out. And when I talked with SPF, they wanted a little bit of a both. They wanted someone to help manage projects. They needed some technical expertise. And so I was fortunate in that I was able to kind of strike a balance there between the two.
That's, yeah, and I think that's, you point out, I work for, HDR's big firm, similar in size to Stantec. And I think that there is a, there is a difference working between a big firm where you have bigger projects, and there are people who are, professional project managers, and some of the environment at a smaller firm where you can have a little bit of both.
Right.
Great. Talk about an important lesson you learned, maybe early on in your career that still suits you well today.
So one of the big ones I have is that, as you kind of touched on, be willing to learn something new. It just seemed that in the engineering consulting field, I didn't have like a single driving passion. I was like, I will learn everything there is about something, butterflies or something. I want to be the butterfly expert. I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. I didn't have that. It was more of the variety and the challenges that come along with different types of projects. So my career, and early on, I realized that, well, if I'm going to keep in the engineering consulting world, I better understand a little bit about this topic, and I better try to, keep my ears open on how does this work. And if there's a new project that came along that requires a little different skill set, I'd be kind of leaning my ear in on that to see what I can learn and be part of that and be willing to take on new challenges. And same with the project management. I saw the writing on the wall that, hey, this PM world is a big thing. There's some big initiatives within the company. They recognize the need for good PMs. So I listened to that, had my ear to it, and say, I am at that point in the career, I better be taking that on. So it was enough to get that PMP certification. So it's held true even now, this very day, listening for opportunities and what's new coming up, what technology don't I understand that maybe I can incorporate into what I do understand. Being able to be a little flexible in where my interests are. It lends well for the engineering consulting world, and it's worked for me so far.
Sure. So along those lines, one of the missions that one of the main goals we have as an organization, as AWA, is to bring professionals together who have different skill sets to address some of the most complex challenges we have in water. So you were talking about kind of anticipating what the next big challenge is. What are your thoughts on that for the state of Idaho? In terms of the next big water challenge that we're going to be facing over the next 10, 20 years. What are some of the challenges on your radar?
Well, I think we see some of that just through some of the big projects that for example, Idaho Water Resource Board conducts and is looking at. We're in southern Idaho. The vast majority is in the Treasure Valley. We're Boise, Caldwell, Nampa, Meridian. The demand for water is there. The domestic, municipal, commercial, industrial. Right now, bulk of the water is used for your agriculture, irrigation purposes. how do you blend the two interests and the competing interests there?
Right.
The big model that the state is trying to come up with to identify areas of recharge, or how do you manage the groundwater system in the Treasure Valley? How do you manage that surface water? Trying to figure out how to balance the competing needs, and how do you manage that overall resource is going to be a challenge. The news that you read, maybe down in Texas or the Ogallala, where you got these rapid declines in the water level, I see that. I say, wow, what can they do? I don't know. Are some of those problems that are coming up in Idaho? Do we have some declining areas? And well, how do we handle that? What
lessons can we learn from the Snake River Basin, and
right.
try to take some of those lessons here to the Treasure Valley.
Right, exactly. So it's inefficient with the water use. There's I don't want to say it's a fixed volume or fixed resource, because it changes every year. Some years we got too much, some years we got not enough.
Right.
All right, well, deal with that. How do we deal with that? There's East Snake Plain Aquifer's got it's a Snake Plain Aquifer. They have those big recharge facilities out there trying to address that. And to me, that's exciting. Those are tangible projects, not just talk and not just waving hands around, but those are tangible projects trying to manage that resource at a big scale, and how we can learn from that, how we can apply it to the Treasure Valley, even down to, if I got a client who wants a new water right, how do I help them figure that out and stay within the overall management of the resource? How do I guide the client correctly so they're well positioned? So to answer your question, it's that foresight of how do we manage that water resource. There's so many competing interests. I was floating the river the other day, just loving it, right? I enjoy that riparian corridor. I enjoy the clean water and the fact that we have access to it. Nice, let's keep that going. But at the same time, I have clients liking the Treasure Valley for their business. All right, well, how do we handle that? I've got another client, they're putting in subdivisions. Well, how do we handle their water demands? All these competing interests. I very much enjoy being part of that, and maybe just having these open conversations through organizations like the Idaho section of the AWRA. Yeah, I can maybe learn something and keep an ear out to those who have interests different than mine. All right, let's hear them. Let's see if we can work together and enjoy the water resource here along Boise Rivers. That's why we like living here. So,
no, I think that's one of the things as a consulting engineer that we gain a little bit of a different perspective on, are really maybe it's empathizing with the competing interests, right? As a consultant, we don't have a specific interest that we champion. We champion our clients. So it gives us a different perspective, and hopefully a helpful perspective in addressing some of these broad interdisciplinary water resources challenges, such as water supply in the Treasure Valley, that are real challenges that affect everyone who lives here.
Right. Yeah, and you're right. As a consultant, I can't champion a particular cause. It doesn't work
right
in the consulting field. That doesn't mean I'd be ignorant of it or be obstinate over certain elements. We live here, we enjoy the resources, but there's also interest in developing the water resource as well. So that's where I fit in and do the best I can to manage things on my part as best possible.
Great. So Steve, I got one last question for you. If you had one bit of advice for somebody, either a high school or a college student who is interested in pursuing water resources as a career, what would that advice be?
That's a fair question. It's a big one. I've got two kids of my own that are going through college.
Okay.
kind of ask them those same questions. You know, what do I want to do with my life? Those types of questions. But the advice is, you know, if you have any kind of interest in a natural resource or a water resource in this situation, is you have to be persistent. You have to be diligent. You're going to have to keep an open eye on where things are going. Seek out that summer employment, the temporary job or a seasonal job, just to kind of get, you know, involved in that arena of study. May not be your permanent final thing, but getting in early to find an internship, perhaps, even if you've, you know, got to work part-time, or there's a bit of an investment into getting those early jobs to understand, is that really where I want to go? Do I find any interest in it? And be willing to work, be willing to, at Stantec, we had interns there, and they were anywhere, their jobs, it's kind of funny, anywhere from, you know, some big CAD efforts, big modeling efforts, working on, you know, spreadsheets of large things, to watering the plants and making coffee, right? It's this huge variety, but they're all good sports. They all did it.
Right.
And
right.
the internship, either it was over the summer or they had a year. Boy, looking back at how much they had learned and appreciated, to see the inner workings of, in this case, it was engineering consulting. I can only speak to that. And so I've encouraged my boys that, yeah, get into those summer jobs, find those internships, work in that field, even if, you know, it's watering plants and making coffee. You at least are engaging in conversations, you're hanging around people, you're rubbing elbows with those who are in the field.
Right.
And sooner or later, you're going to learn something, you're going to pick up on something, you'll find an opportunity. And yeah, just conduct yourself well and stay focused and be there, participate.
Perfect. Well, Steve, thank you for your time today. Thanks for your insights. It was really fun to get to know you through this Meet the Professional interview. And I'd like to say, you know, anyone who is interested in meeting you, Steve, can they reach out to you through the SPF website, or is there a good way for them to reach you?
Yeah, SPF. Yeah, anyone Boise area, they know how to get a hold of SPF.
Perfect. Great. Thanks again, Steve. Have a great day. And again, to everyone who's watching, you know, please check out the Idaho section of the AWRA website. We update that regularly. We keep our calendar up to date, and we're posting new information all the time. Thanks again.
Good organization. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and Steve, we should get together sometime after COVID blows over. Our offices are only across the street from each other. Get together for lunch sometime.
Let's do it. I would love it.
Sounds good. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mike. Bye.